All right, let's go ahead and start our second class. Before we do, let's make sure that we're standing on worship ground. It's just as important for the second class as it is for the first class. So I'm going to give you a couple of moments to make sure that, prepare yourself, make sure you're standing on worship ground. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the fellowship during the break and for the opportunity to socialize. And now as we get ready to study again, we ask that you give us everything necessary, including genuine humility, concentration, self-discipline, teachability. And we pray in Christ's name, amen. Okay, we're just going to pick it right back up where we were. We just finished subpoint 2. We're in the the functional virtue of morality towards man. And we're in subpoint 3. Okay, so it's 3 with single parents around it. These laws, Sherwood Forest. Okay, these laws, we're talking about the laws of divine establishment. So these laws include the function of the, quote, divine institutions, comma, end quote, which are, colon, so again, divine institutions is a word that the Colonel came up with, okay, and what it is the fact that God has created these institutions or these categories of humankind in which we are supposed to function, in which we're supposed to function properly. And each one of these categories has its own set of laws or rules associated with it, and there are 4 of them. And I'm about ready to give you all 4 of them after the colon here. So we have, which are, colon, self-determination, semicolon, marriage, semicolon, family, semicolon, and nationalism, period. See, so as one of the logistical forms of logistical grace are these divine institutions, and the idea being that for maximum amount of blessing, for maximum capacity and maximum blessing, you should have a nation that's functioning properly. And if you have a nation that's functioning properly and obeying the laws of God and functioning with regard to that, giving its citizens maximum freedom, then we have the nationalism, and that gives every believer the maximum opportunity for grace, for logistical grace, for happiness. And then what happens is you step backwards as things start malfunctioning. So as the nation goes to pot and starts malfunctioning, and you start having the nation, instead of accepting and encouraging freedom, they start taking it away. Like what's happened, we have a government sometimes whose sole reason for existence is their own, so that they can exist and stay in government. Our government sessions are way too long. They have way too many laws for what we need to have laws for. Okay, so you think about the primary rule, the primary function of the government. And it's not to just sit there, go to Congress, and make all kinds of laws to keep themselves employed. The idea was it was supposed to protect the nation, give us maximum freedoms, not take them away. But as those things start to go, then you can go back. Then you have family, so you can backtrack into the family, and you have maximum happiness in the family and maximum blessing in the family with a properly functioning family. Then, as the family starts to malfunction, you can go back and you have the marriage. You have the right man, right woman, and they can take comfort in each other, and they can have maximum happiness even though the family may be malfunctioning. You have that one kid that just doesn't want to, be a believer, that just doesn't want to function properly, that is going to be incorrigible or whatever, or that crazy uncle, or, the crazy aunt, or whatever that's going on with the family, okay, that you've got to back off from the family. Well, then you have the marriage. You have the marriage relationship. Then, if the marriage relationship starts to go, if one of the partners starts to malfunction, they get out of fellowship, stay out of fellowship, become reversionistic, go through the arrogance complex and into the hatred complex, then you have self-determination, you have the individual. And that's totally on you, your proper function. Nobody can force you to malfunction. You always have to remember that. That's what we studied in James. The only way you malfunction is you decide to malfunction. See, people want, it's human nature to try and blame everybody else. There can be a myriad of people that are providing the testing circumstances. There can be a myriad of systems that are providing the testing circumstances. You ever deal with, nowadays it seems to be the health profession. We were just talking about that at break, Now you have to deal with insurance and the health companies and everything else, right? Or if you have to deal with the cable company, or I got that struck a chord, or anything like that, right? The idea is all of those can provide opportunities to give you testing to try and pull you outside of the divine dynasphere. But only you, and that's what we studied again in James, only you can make the decision that I'm going to exit the divine dynasphere and function improperly. Okay, so these divine institutions are set up so that you can function properly, so that you can have maximum happiness, maximum blessing, and of course, maximum service. And the best is to have nationalism, but as it starts to go, like I say, we go backwards, okay? So we have which are self-determination, marriage, family, and nationalism, period. Continue the point. They, and the they we're talking about are the laws of divine establishment. They also include diet, comma. See, in the Old Testament, we all know about the Old Testament, the laws that were associated with diet. They couldn't eat pork, for example, right? They couldn't, they had to make sure to drain the blood out of everything before they ate it. A lot of that was associated with the sanitary practices, but it also had spiritual connotations. But the idea is now we're not under the Mosaic law anymore, but now we still have the concept of diet. We have in Romans. In Romans chapter 14, for example, we're told that the immature believer is the one that eats only vegetables. Right? So what does that say about the vegetarian believer? If they're not doing it for because they have some health restriction, then they're just not very mature. Because God put everything under our control, okay? And everything, we are at the top of the food chain. Sometimes, it doesn't seem that way, but we are at the top of the food chain. We can eat anything we want to eat in moderation, okay? So you can eat pork. You can eat lamb. You can eat plants. Okay, we have everything. God has provided us that, but He tells us, okay, that it's in moderation, and it's our responsibility to treat our bodies properly and to eat properly. Okay, so we have they include diet, comma, sanitation, comma. They told you how to dig a leach line. In fact, one of the verses, I heard a chuckle because one of the verses that's in that passage that I told you about is where it tells us, it tells the Jews that they're supposed to bury their poop, right? And it says because the Lord walks through the camp. Okay. The kids, when we were reading that back in the day, they thought it was funny. It was like, ooh, God doesn't want to step in any poop, right? But it's sanitation. Okay, so you have sanitation, quarantine, comma. How did the AIDS virus get as bad as it did? Because we let politics tell us that we weren't supposed to quarantine the individuals. If politics weren't around, if people were functioning properly, when you had a disease that spread like that, you could have stopped it very quickly. But because it was associated with a particular preference or lifestyle, we were told we couldn't do that. So it spread, and many people died as a result. Anyway, quarantine, comma, soil conservation, comma. The Mosaic Law tells us, for example, about letting the land go fallow on the 7th year to allow it to rest. Okay, that's the soil conservation. You can't just keep farming the same land with the same crop. And it took us a while to learn that when we turned away from the Bible. right? And now you have farmers that understand that. And we have the concept of rotating crops, so that you have one crop that takes one kind of nutrient out of the soil and puts in a different kind, and then you rotate it with one that puts back in what the other crop took out, okay, and uses whatever the other crop provided. And so you rotate these crops, so you have soil conservation. Guess what? That's biblical. Okay, so you have soil conservation, comma, taxation. They had tithing and taxing, two different things. Military service, comma. Yeah, there you go. And the idea in the Old Testament too was that, for example, you have the individual that when the soldier, when he's first married, he's given time off to be with his wife. Now, why would that be? Well, for several reasons. One is he's not going to be a very good soldier if he's worried about his wife at home all the time, and he puts everybody else in jeopardy, right? So the idea is that they got a year off, when they got married, so that they could focus on that, and then they would be better soldiers coming back. So anyway, he had military service, comma, laws of divorce, comma. There are laws associated with divorce and the right of remarriage versus just separation. And criminal law. So they also include diet, sanitation, quarantine, soil conservation, taxation, military service, laws of divorce, and criminal law, to include rules of apprehension, comma. See, in the Bible, you had sanctuary cities. Of course, now that's a bad term because of the sanctuary cities now that are associated with evading citizenship and evading deportation, right? You've got these individuals that can go into a sanctuary city and they don't have to worry. No one's going to allow ICE to go in there and actually get them. Okay. In fact, I feel sorry for the ICE people because nobody is helping them. It's the only law enforcement branch that has absolutely no help. The U.S. Marshals have help. You have sheriffs that have help. You have police officers that get help from other cities. You have federal agents that get help from other agencies. And the ICE guys are left out there by their own, on their own, because nobody is going to help them. In fact, you have California that's making laws that says they're going to prosecute employees that do help ICE. That is horrible. Okay. Anyway, including rules of apprehension, comma, trial, comma, evidence, comma. For example, in a capital case, okay, in a capital case, you had to have two witnesses. If you didn't have two witnesses, you couldn't administer capital punishment. And so that's why when we have the incorrigible child and the father and the mother have to go before the court and say that this child is incorrigible, then the elders can take the child out and stone him. Okay, because incorrigibility was a capital crime, but it required two witnesses, and the father and the mother were the witnesses. Okay, and you had situations where if a woman was raped, if there were people around and she screamed, okay, for help, then it was a capital case. If she didn't scream, okay, if she didn't try and protect herself, then she was executed too for sexual impropriety. Okay, because then it wasn't rape, it was adultery. So they had different, they had rules like that. Now, if they were out in the woods, it says if they're out in in an area that's not populated and the woman doesn't scream, well, it's kind of one of those if a tree falls, right? If the woman doesn't scream, she's okay. She can't be tried for that. Okay, but anyway, you had evidence. The other thing about evidence, which we don't even think about, is in a capital case, if you had a witness who perjured himself and it was found that he perjured himself, he got the same punishment that the person on trial would receive, whether the person on trial is found guilty or not. So, for example, if you're a witness in a capital case, a murder case, and you lie, you perjure yourself, you say, yeah, I saw the person do it, and then it comes out later that you weren't even around, there was no way you could have seen it happen, then guess what? Whether that person's found guilty or not, you're executed. Okay? we do something like that, and maybe people wouldn't be so concerned about capital cases, whether they were getting the innocent or not, right? You'd have less perjury, you'd have less lying. Okay. Anyway, that was part of evidence, comma, sentencing, comma. Now, and out of the Mosaic Law, sentencing happened very quickly. You didn't have this business where the person, first of all, the person's captured, right? The police get them, and then sometime in between 1 and 10 years, they go to trial, okay? And then after they go to trial, then there's like another 2 to 3 years before they actually get their sentencing, right? And then the sentencing is to be, spend 20 years incarcerated, but for time already served, they get off. Yeah, no, that isn't what happened in the Mosaic Law. You get captured on Monday. On Tuesday, you went before the judge, and you had your trial on Thursday if you were found guilty. On Wednesday, you were sentenced, and on Thursday, if it was a capital crime, you were executed, or if it was another type of crime, you were put to work. And the sentencing always focused on the victim, not on the criminal. It wasn't like, ooh, we're only going to sentence him to this because, he's got this problem or that problem, or he's already done this time or that time. No, it was focused on the victim. You stole $100, your sentence was you pay $200. Okay, that way everybody's satisfied. You learn your lesson that it doesn't pay to steal. The victim is compensated, and the state is happy. It's taken care of. If you say I don't have the money to pay $200, or I wouldn't have stolen it in the first place, then the state says, fine, we've got this road we're building, or this dam that we're building, or whatever, and we're going to put you to work, and you're going to earn money, and that money you're going to earn is going to be paid to the victim until you do, or have paid the $200. Okay, and that was the only form of incarceration. They didn't incarcerate to try and rehabilitate. And then if the person said, no, I'm not going to do that. That's too hot out there. I'm not going to work out there. That's a tent city. I can't be in a tent city. Pink underwear and baloney. I'm not going to do it. Okay, then they said, fine. And they take the person out and they administer 40 lashes minus 1. It's 39 lashes. And if you're still alive at the end of that, they say, now what? Now are you going to go out there and do it? And if you still said, no, I'm not going to do it, then the state said, fine, and they took you out and they executed you because you were a drain on the state and you were incorrigible and you were not worth, okay, being allowed to live. And that was all proper. Anyway, so we have apprehension, trial, evidence, sentencing, etc. All these are part of the laws of divine establishment. Okay? So etc. period. Subpoint 4. Human beings, that would be us in most cases, human beings, comma, unlike animals, comma, were created with the moral capacity to learn and know right from wrong, and the volition to choose one over the other. This responsibility is clearly shown in God's command to Adam recorded in Genesis 2:16 and 17, which states, comma, quote, You are free that means you have the ability, you have the divinely given ability and right. Okay, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, comma. But you must never eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, comma. Now note it doesn't say the knowledge between good and evil. It's the knowledge of good and evil. In the perfect environment, getting doctrine on a regular basis and living a perfect life, they didn't need to know either good or evil. They were being given what was perfect, which of course was good. And that's all they needed to know. But they were given that challenge, okay? From the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, comma, for when you eat of it, dying you shall die, period, end quote. And of course, we understand that that means dying spiritually, you're going to die physically. We study that during communion. Okay, so we are given that capacity. And part of our soul, when we study the mentality of the soul, we understand that we have self-conscience, or we have conscience. Okay, subpoint 5. Human beings are unique from all other creatures on earth in that within their very existence, as part of the mentality of the soul, they have a God-given and doctrinally fulfilled moral capacity called conscience. And that's spelled conscience. C-O-N-S-C-I-E-N-C-E. I spell that because I always used to get conscience and conscience, okay, messed up, okay. Consciousness. Well, anyway, I can't even say it now because I'm thinking too hard on it. But anyway, God, capacity called conscience. Subpoint 6. God's moral laws or the laws of divine establishment are reflective of his divine nature, colon. They are prescriptive. And you can open parentheses, and put, quote, you shall not, dot, 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 end quote, close parentheses, comma. So in other words, God is fair, right? He tells us beforehand, don't do this. He isn't one of those that says, ooh, you shouldn't have done that, right? Ooh, I'm going to hide it from you, and when you mess up, I'm going to punish you. No, the prescriptive. Don't do this. Don't do that. Do this. Do that. Okay? So that's his nature. So the prescriptive, comma, perfect. Psalm 18:7. And you can put that in here if you like. Psalm 18:7, correct translation says, lo and behold, it says, the law of the Lord is perfect, comma. We could stop there, but I'll give you the rest of it. Okay. The law of the Lord is perfect, comma, restoring the soul, colon, or semicolon, excuse me. The testimony of the Lord is confirmed, slant faithful. I'm getting a weird look. Is it 18 or 19? Did I make a mistake? It's 19:7? Sorry about that. Psalm 19:7. Yeah, I realized as I'm looking at it, I realized I fat fingered it last night. So it's 19:7. I can see that look back there going, no, wait a minute. 18:7 is the one that tells them that you're not supposed to hide things, or you're supposed, right? Something like that. Okay, Psalm 18:7 says the law of, or 19:7, sorry, 19:7 says the law of the Lord is perfect, comma, restoring the soul, semicolon. The testimony of the Lord is confirmed, slant faithful, comma, making wise the simple. Period. So you can close I had that in parents. I had Psalm 19:7 in parents. What makes it even worse, I have electronic version that I do a lot of my language work on, because it has a lot of the references and stuff. And the problem is, it does one of those where it has both the Hebrew and the English. And so what happens is a lot of times it messes up the chapter and verse. Because first of all, and particularly, and it does it in Psalm primarily, right? And so one of the reasons it'll say 18:7 instead of 19:7 is because it gets off count, because it also counts. See, in the English, we don't include in the Psalms, we don't include in the versation the introduction. Most of the Psalms say something like, a Psalm of David to the choir director, blah, 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 right? That in the Hebrew gets a verse number. Okay. In the English, it doesn't. So what happens is when I say Psalm 19:7 in the Hebrew, it's 19:8. And in the electronic version, there's enough of those that lead up to it that sometimes it gets messed up and it'll say the wrong chapter. So I have a little bit of an excuse, not much, but I have a little bit. Okay. Anyway, so they're prescriptive, comma, perfect, comma, objective, and not subjective, comma. In other words, what that means is God's laws are for everybody. That doesn't matter who you are. It's not subjective. It's not like, oh, well, if you're this kind of person, then this law applies. But if you're that kind of person, that law applies. No, it's objective. It's not based on the subject. It's not based on you. Okay, objective and not subjective, comma, and universal, or for all people, period. And the proof text for that is Romans 2:15. Okay?
Sorry, what was that?
Romans 2:15. So, since they are for everybody, we have, like I say, the opportunity for an unbeliever to have limited morality. Okay? If they function, and I keep saying okay, but if they function properly with respect to the laws of the nation. But we are moral. Not only do we respect the laws of the nation, the laws of divine establishment associated with the nation, but those associated with each other, with the church, how we're supposed to function in impersonal love, and how we're supposed to function towards each other. That's why I say limited, because this also includes a function of impersonal love, okay, that the unbeliever can't have. Okay. Subpoint 7. And this is going to give us some information. Any good law has got a couple things associated with it, and this is what we're going to learn here. Subpoint 7. These laws also include stated punishments for transgressions or non-observance up to and including capital punishment. Period. Remember, in Peter, when we were studying the fact that the individual was supposed to put themselves under the authority of the nation in which they lived, right? They're also supposed to take that. We saw that concept of authority goes all the way down, not only from the national law, but down to the state law, the city law, the local law, right? And into a family. We have what we're going to see, right? We started off in verse 3 with the woman subordinating herself to the husband. We're going to see the responsibilities of the husband too. And the husband is supposed to be the law of the household. Now, you can't make laws that go against the other laws of the higher authority. But where you as the husband have the authority to make the laws, you're supposed to make them. And that includes the punishment for them. And the problem that we have nowadays is we have parents that make these quote unquote laws, they make these rules and restrictions, and they're too lily-livered to enact any kind of punishment. So you have those parents that say, Johnny, don't do that or you're going to get this. And Johnny does it, and it's like, now what, Mom? Well, don't do it again or I'm going to do this. And they do it again. Well, don't do that, just wait. I'm going to really get mad and then I'm going to do something. Right? No, that's not the way it's supposed to happen. The father's supposed to say, Johnny, don't do that. If your mom sees you doing that, this is what's going to happen. Your mom or I, right? And then while the dad's going off and doing work, the kid's there, and the traditional family, as we like to talk about it, right? And the mother's there, and the child does it, and she says, okay, when your father comes home, and the father becomes a disciplinarian. And the father comes home, and before he can do anything else, mom says, Johnny did this. And the father said, okay, Johnny, come over here, right? And you get the punishment. Because why? Because it was a law, and the kid is functioning improperly, is showing rebellion, and that's what the punishment is for. The punishment is never really for for cruelty towards the kids. Not I should say really. The punishment is never to be cruel to the kid, but it's also not not to just punish the kid. It's to get rid of the rebellion, to get proper authority orientation. So that as the child grows up, they understand authority orientation. Because if they don't understand authority orientation in the family, and they go out in society, eventually someone is going to force them to understand authority orientation. It's either going to be a bully who's going to take them out, or it's going to be the uniformed officer that has the authority and catches the kid doing something he's not supposed to do, and the next thing you know, he's in jail. And people go, oh, how did this happen? Well, if the kid wasn't incorrigible, because there are kids that will, are incorrigible. That's why we have the capital punishment for kids. But if the kid wasn't incorrigible, and most of them aren't, they're just normally functioning kids that haven't been brought up correctly. And people hate when you say that. Well, I did everything I could for my son. No, you didn't. Unless your kid is truly incorrigible, you didn't. Okay? Anyway, that's because they won't take the law, okay, has to have teeth. So these laws also include stated punishments for transgression or non-observance up to and including capital punishment. Continue the point. By definition, to disagree with and refuse to conform to these laws makes the individual immoral. Period. So that's part of the definition. And that's, a case in point right now in our society. One of the things that's happening is we have people who are trying to redefine words and trying to use words that aren't offensive and trying to use words that hide the real fact. And so consequently, you have undocumented workers. No, call a spade, as they say, and use the real term. They are not conforming to the law. They are illegal. And since they're not citizens, they're aliens. So they are illegal aliens, not undocumented workers. Quit calling them that. They are breaking the law. And we refuse to accept that. We have people who refuse to accept that. Oh, these are fantastic and wonderful people. They're breaking the law. They are, by their very nature, immoral. See, that's one of the things that we learn here. It's not just breaking the law. They are immoral. People don't want to say that. The teeth have been removed. Okay. So, makes the individual immoral. Subpoint 8. Regarding capital punishment, we always have to hit this one while we're here because it needs to be hammered over and over. Regarding capital punishment, comma, the nation that refuses to protect its citizens by enforcing capital punishment is an immoral nation, period. See, we've gone to the point where we don't want to have capital punishment. So what happens? We get an individual that should have undergone capital punishment. Instead, they don't. They get life. And then what happens is some ding-dong comes along and commutes that or whatever, and they get out. And guess what? They do it again. You didn't protect your citizen. Whoever did that commutation, whoever let that individual out, whatever judge said that it was only 20 years instead of capital punishment, okay, should be the one that gets the punishment when the second person is killed. They didn't protect the nation. This individual that has been accused and will ultimately get convicted or was convicted, I don't know whether it's convicted yet or not, of the crimes against the gymnasts, okay? Yeah, he was convicted, I'm sorry, because he got some, exorbitant number, like 35, life terms or something like that, right? That's ridiculous. Rape is a capital crime. What he did to those girls was rape. Over and over and over and over and over again, he should have been killed. And he should be killed now. It doesn't even take a second thought. so that there's no chance that he will ever be considered to be reformed and get out again. Right? Espionage. What's her name? That was a what's his name? I don't even want to say it. Okay, that got commuted. Is now running for Senate or Congress, whatever it is. That individual should have been executed. Gave secrets in ways that intelligence is collected in names of people, you know, that they're not protecting the citizens, not protecting the agents. And you let that person get her sentence commuted. First of all, it was a he when he went in prison, and then we paid for it on taxpayer money to turn him into a her, and then she gets commuted. Now she's running for Congress. She should be in the grave. For at least two of those reasons. Okay. Anyway, it's an immoral nation, period. Genesis 9:6. Exodus 21, 12 through 23. Leviticus 24, 17 and 21. Slow down, sorry about it. Exodus 21, 12 through 23. Leviticus 24, 17 and 21. Coffee's kicking in. Deuteronomy 19, 11 through 30. And 19:21. Romans 1:3. And Romans 13:4. Continue the point. Genesis 9:6 is the basic commandment for the death penalty to be exacted and then carried out by members of the human race. Okay, Genesis 9:6 is the basic commandment for the death penalty to be exacted and then carried out by members of the human race. And I'm going to give you Genesis 9:6 as exegeted by Pastor O'Brien. Starts with a parent with a single line through it. The one, close parent with single line through it. The one, shedding the blood of man, comma. And here we're talking about improper shedding. We're not talking about killing like a soldier or a police officer may have to do or something like that. We're talking about murder, okay? The one shedding the blood of man, comma, and then underlined, it's emphasized, by man. See, it doesn't say God is going to do this. God doesn't, we're going to put him in prison, and if God wants him dead, God will kill him. No. No. You're supposed to do it, okay? By man, that's underlined. His blood, that's underlined, shall be shed, comma.
So by man, his blood is all underlined?
Yeah, but they're underlined in two chunks for two different reasons. One is because of the word order, and the other one is because of the tense of the word, okay? So by man it was out of order, and his blood is different. It's the way it's actually used grammatically. Okay, so by man his blood shall be shed, comma, because in the image of God He, and he is capitalized here, we're talking about God, because in the image of God, he manufactured mankind. Period. See, again, God's laws are victim-oriented. They aren't criminal-oriented. They're victim-oriented. Okay? So if someone comes in and rapes your wife or kills someone in your family, okay, and they are captured, they go through a proper trial, you have two witnesses, they're found guilty, the punishment is they're going to be executed. And the executor is the head of the household. So if I, as the head of the household, am the victim, it was my wife or my child was killed or whatever happened, okay, I am the head of the household, I become the executioner. Now, why is that? That sounds like, gee, you know, you're putting that poor victim through it. No, the idea is that by seeing justice done, I can have a proper mental attitude. I don't have to have revenge tactics. I don't have to have hatred. I can have the forgiveness that's necessary. Okay, you can forgive the individual for the act that they did. Now, forgiveness doesn't mean you let them go. You say, I forgive you. Yeah, no, or whatever you do. Okay. The idea is that as it's called the avenger of blood, as the household, as the victim, you see that the national laws work. That person is not going to be around to do to anybody else's family what they did to yours. And that God's laws are fair. The individual was tried. He was convicted under the laws and consequently executed. The state is satisfied because the individual is taken out of society where he's not going to cause any more harm. The nation is protected. The person, the victim, is satisfied. He got justice. He got to see it happen. He himself, as the executor, okay, performed that justice, was able to have forgiveness, was able to have what we call in today's terms closure, okay, saw that justice was done, didn't have to have hatred towards the individual, and then society moves on. But in our system, it's completely backwards, right? The individual that's convicted gets to give their sob story of why they did this because they grew up in a broken home or whatever, right? They become kind of the victim, quote unquote. The poor person who's had this thing happen to them gets taken completely out of the picture in many cases. They might get the opportunity to say something at sentencing, but depending on the judge, it's either listened to or not, right? And then they never get to see what the end result is. Because a person may get the death sentence, but all that means is you sit on death row for 35 years until you die of old age. Okay? Which is not appropriate for the individual on death row either, because now you've put them in this constant state of anxiety. And so they can't function properly. Even if they became a believer while they're on death row, now they've got to sit there and have that constant pressure to stay in fellowship because they've got to worry about, when is it that their sentence is actually going to happen? All these things are just backwards because we aren't functioning properly. Okay? Subpoint 9. God also punishes individuals who disregard morality. So first we have God commands capital punishment, and then mankind executes it. Now we have God also punishes individuals who disregard morality. 1 Thessalonians 4:6. It says that no man sin against and defraud his brother in any matter, comma, And on your sheet, by the way, it doesn't have some of these other ones. It just has Genesis 9:6. Okay, so you can add these other ones to your circle sheet if you still have it with you. Anyway, 1 Thessalonians 4:6, that no man sin against and defraud his brother in any matter, comma, because the Lord is the avenger in all of these things, comma, just as we have told you before, and solemnly warned you, period. The Lord is the avenger in all these things, just as we have told you before. Oh, I'm sorry. And defraud his brother in any matter. In any matter. That means any action. Sorry about that. My nose gets plugged, and I know I talk nasally. Sometimes. Anyway. So, altogether, that no man sin against and defraud his brother in any matter, because the Lord is the avenger of all these things, just as we have told you before and solemnly warned you. So you start functioning and defrauding individuals or sinning against individuals, and you're not only sinning against them, and they have a claim to you, but the Lord is going to avenge them as well. And you will be punished for what you have done to them. Okay, and that leads into triple compound discipline that we've studied in the past, and I won't go into here, but that's one of those types of examples of sinning against an individual and getting punished by God. Subpoint 10. Oh, yeah, that's right. Subpoint 10. Almost thought I missed one. Morality includes not only overt actions, but mental and verbal actions as well. Period. In these, comma, we are also warned against improper usage. So in other words, when you have mental attitude sins against an individual or whatever, that makes you immoral as well. And when you're speaking out against an individual, that makes you immoral as well. Morality is also associated with how you're treating each other, okay, both mentally and verbally, not just physically. And so as an example, we have James 4:11. And this comes from our previous study of James. James 4:11. Stop slandering, speaking evil of one another, comma, brethren, period. The one, and one is in pairs with a single line through it. It's elliptical. The one slandering, speaking evil of a brother or judging his brother, comma, slanders, speaks evil of the law and judges the law, semicolon. See, that's why it's immoral, right? We said morality is obeying the law. You are moral because you obey the law. Well, if you're slandering or judging the law, it makes you immoral. Okay, so by doing this is immorality as well. People don't think of it that way because they don't understand morality. Okay, slander speaks evil of the law and judges the law, semicolon. And if you judge the law, and the law here is underlined, comma, you are never, and never is underlined, a doer of the law, but, underline, comma, a judge, period. See, so the idea here is if you're always looking for ways to make fun of the law, ways to judge the law, right, ways to get out of your responsibility of performing your function under the laws of divine establishment, then you're immoral and you're a quote-unquote judge. See, this is what James is saying here is sarcastic. You're not a doer. You can't be a doer because you're fighting it all the time. Instead, you think you're a judge. And you are immoral. Okay, that makes us ready. There's 14 subpoints under here. We're ready for point 11, and we're going to have to pick that up next week because we're going to close the class for today. And in closing, we're going to close with a song.